Chapter 2.
Roland Williams had been our first visitor from England. He worked at Newcourt, N.M. Rothschild & Sons, the family bank, and was on his way to South Africa on business. We suspected that this was a benevolently inquisitive call to find out how we were managing. As it happened, we were managing rather well. We were settling in, working hard, and consolidating the business. We were making our way in the canine world in which I had played such an enthusiastic part in England. We were getting to know our staff. We had imported a prize bull from England with which to build up our pedigree Guernsey herd. And our social life was getting livelier. Chronically allergic as I am, there were times when I coughed my way through the whole day, but that was a problem with which we learnt to live. There were others, more immediately solvable.
6th of November, 1949. After we had seen off Roland Williams and finished last Sunday's letter to you, we had no less than 3 lots of visitors who came to see our imported cattle. There have been others later in the week, and 4 different people, all concerned with the cattle business, who have said that Valentine of Fernhill Park is the best bull they have ever seen in Kenya. On October the 17th, he was injected with red water fever vaccine, combined with anaplasmosis. On Wednesday evening this week, Clark came to tell me that his temperature was 107 degrees. The normal temperature of cattle out here is around 101.5 degrees. We injected Pirivan, which should bring the temperature down immediately. At this stage, we were pleased that he was showing a reaction, because the whole idea of these injections is to give the animal the actual tick-borne disease, under conditions when one can control and watch the illness. Once they have had it, they are immune in the future. However, when we found an hour later that his temperature had risen to 108 degrees, we began to get worried, especially as he was lying down and refused to get up. At 10 p.m. I fetched Clark in the small car and we went up to him again. He was standing up in his box and we were full of hope as we went to take his temperature. We found that it was so high that the mercury had reached the top of the thermometer where it reads 110 degrees. We took it again to confirm it. We shall never know how much his temperature rose above that astounding figure. We gave him another injection of Pirivan, keeping carefully by us some adrenaline, for they sometimes have a collapse after this treatment. It shows the amazing strength of the bull that he expressed his discomfort at such a high temperature by roaring and pawing the ground, throwing the sawdust on which he is bedded up over the rugs on his back. We stayed with him for an hour, standing outside his box in the moonlight, talking quietly. And suddenly we saw him start to eat, a little lucerne. We went in to him, took his temperature again, and found to our intense relief that it had subsided to 103.5 degrees. His breathing was very fast and irregular. We stayed on until he lay down, and Clark himself came back in the early hours of the morning. I have had a serious talk with Clark, and as a result he has pulled himself together. He covered him over with sacks and stayed with him a little while, thankful that we had a night guard on the cattle, because he heard many leopards coughing. After this we had another scare, for we formed the impression that at least half our working oxen did not justify the name of ox. As they are herded in the craterland where our senior heifer herd runs, we set out to examine them. They are the wildest things, and they lash out as soon as touched, and even bite. They have enormous horns and humps. With great difficulty, Clark did examine them all, and we found 3 which might be capable of ideas above their station in life. These 3 are destined for the tin, poor dears. I have been trying to get Rosemary to answer an invitation to lunch for this weekend. She was in the grocer's shop about a fortnight ago, when she was pounced upon by a very effusive lady, to whom she thought she had previously been introduced. This garrulous person asked her to lunch, and Rosemary, not wishing to show that she had no idea who the lady was, said she would see what I was doing, and could she write an answer. She was given the lady's post office box number, but in her agitation wrote down our own box number. And so, when she got home, we had no trace of the good lady. Not knowing what to do, Rosemary did nothing, and continued to do nothing for several days, whilst the luncheon date gradually drew nearer. We made inquiries, and reached the conclusion that it must be one of two people. And then, being told that one of them could talk the hind leg off a donkey, we presumed that she was the one. Eventually, in fear and trepidation, Rosemary could not delay writing another single day. So she took up her pen and wrote to thank her for her kind invitation, but regretting that we could not accept. When Charles and Mattie Long came to tea on Tuesday, we discovered that Rosemary has written to the wrong person. On Monday, whilst David was entertaining Vi's grandchildren to tea, and I thought I had a quiet evening to deal with my farm correspondence, a hard-faced businessman appeared who extended his hand and announced that his name was Heath. This conveyed nothing to me, unless he was related to the murderer, which by his appearance he might have been. I offered him a chair and a cigarette, and we talked about this and that, whilst I wondered what he wanted to sell. Rosemary tried to come to my rescue, and said brightly that she was just going down to the cowshed with the children, and would he like to come and look at the cows? We then discovered that he had called some days before when we were out, and had been all round the stock. Eventually he said he would like some milk, at which I looked down my nose, for I do not like selling small quantities of milk, because it upsets the dairy routine. Then I suddenly realized what he meant, and that I was in the presence of the man who has the largest retail milk round in Nakuru. My manner changed perceptibly, I think. As a result, we are sending all our evening milk, 50 gallons, every day to his dairy. We hope to send our morning milk too later on, because we are shortly going over to a new pig food, which will eliminate the necessity for feeding skim. Unknown to Freddie and Vi, a large number of violet plants arrived down from Kabazi as a gift from the manager of the market garden. I think Rosemary must have mentioned how much she loves violets when she was up there one morning recently. Omadi, our head gardener, grumbled because Rosemary made him prepare 3 flower beds before she decided which one to put them in. She promised him and his mate a small piece of soap each, which they love having, if they kept the violets alive. As a result, the plants were swamped with water, and many branches were cut off our trees to give them shade. Omadi's last and voluble instructions to Rosemary on Saturday were that she should water them on Sunday, so that they should be alive for him to have his soap on Monday. I wonder whether I told you a few weeks ago that we had a visit from a chief of the Jaluo tribe. We have something of a Jaluo stronghold on this farm, and with a view to recruiting some more labour for the coffee picking, I made rather a fuss of him. I sent some milk down to Abuaka, the headman, so that he could entertain the chief properly, and I sent him back to Nakuru in the car when his visit was over. He, for his part, held a baraza, meeting, of all the workers of whatever tribe on the farm, and I was rather touched that he came to me afterwards to give me a report on this baraza. He said that he had told them that they must all work hard, and that they must not steal anything which did not belong to them. I presented the chief with a gift. It was rather difficult to find something suitable, as he did not drink or smoke, but I managed to find one of those silver coins which were sold at the time of the Jubilee of the King and Queen. I gave him this, and showed him the head of the King and Queen on the one side, and the picture of the House of Commons on the other. This latter building, I told him, was where they held barazas in England, when the Wazee, elders, held a council. This week I received a letter from the chief. Dear Sir, I am very glad to inform you about my arrival at home. The medal you presented to me was showed to the district commissioner and the members of the meeting. Each and every one was very happy and clapped their hands 3 times for what you did for me. Thank you very much, sir. Hoping for your favourable reply. Sincerely yours. The letter is signed with a rubber stamp, Chief Zephaniah Abungu. There are a lot of hornets about, and we had 3 nests hanging from the rafters in the boxes of the imported animals. The other evening, an African came along with a stirrup pump. After spraying the nests for a moment with water, he took a piece of cloth from his pocket, put it in the palm of his hand, reached up, and took the nest with his hand and crushed all the hornets in his palm. Those few which were still crawling around he pinched between his bare thumb and first finger. It was a performance well worth seeing, for these hornets are dangerous insects and can give one a nasty sting. 13th of November 1949. The maize is brown and crisp, but we cannot harvest it because we are busy with the coffee. It must wait its turn, and meanwhile we have to keep on the guards against the baboons. Setting out to check on these guards one afternoon this week, I found a recumbent form lying in a field beside the maize. He was sound asleep and covered by a white blanket. Nearby, in a tree, a huge baboon was keeping watch on him. Reductio ad absurdum. John Ward and his sister Sheila came for the day on Thursday. Unfortunately, their visit clashed with the arrival from the station of some 45 young trees and shrubs which we had ordered for our garden from the nurseries near Nairobi. At lunchtime, we heard screams from Monique, who had been to the kitchen about David's lunch, and found a snake with its head peering out from a hole into which it had retired after taking a look at her. I hastily fetched my shotgun and relieved it of its head with one shot. Then I pulled its squirming body out of the hole and found it was nearly 2 feet long. It was quite a thin snake, which Rosemary identified the next day at the Corendon Museum as a grass snake, and only mildly venomous. She spent the day in Nairobi sending off food parcels for our Christmas presents to you all, and to many others. We do hope that they reach you in time. We went down to the government school late one evening this week to try to arrange about the education of Clark's second son, and whilst I was talking to the headmaster, Rosemary was engaged in the car in a much more interesting conversation with Karanja, our chauffeur. "Did you have a good holiday, Karanja?" "Yes, Ma'am Sahib," said Karanja. "Did you bring back your new Bibi with you?" "No, because I am sharing a room with Mora." Mora is the temporary chauffeur we engaged, who is now going to take over driving the lorry. Then Rosemary asked which huts were occupied by which houseboys, and learned that Gwara, our cook, had at last imported one of his wives, presumably to cook for him. Many giggles from Karanja, who said that Gwara's wife was a Wazee, elder, and pointed to his teeth to show that she evidently was toothless. Rosemary then asked whether his new wife was also a Wazee. More giggles, and she gathered that his wife was short and not tall, and a very young teenager. Then Karanja told Rosemary that Gwara had 3 wives. Much sighing, and he said, "Ah, 3 wives no good for any boy. Mbaya, mbaya." "No," said Rosemary, delighted that he had such an idealistic approach to the subject of marriage. "I should hate the bwana to have 3 wives." "Yes," said Karanja, 3 wives no good for bwana or boys, cost too many shillings." So were Rosemary's illusions shattered, and the rest of the conversation consisted of Karanja drawing in the dust on the window the figures 1,500 to show the number of shillings he had had to pay for his wife. When I rejoined them, Rosemary was agreeing heartily how scandalous and exorbitant the price was, knowing full well that he would shortly ask for a rise in his pay in order to pay off his debts. We have all been busy with the coffee, which is now at last ripening up. There are 8 separate coffee chambers of different sizes, but each containing some thousands of trees. They cover an area of 180 acres. When a coffee bean starts to turn from green to pink, there are about 8 days in which to pick it before it is overripe. When large numbers of the trees start turning at the same time, there is a scramble to get round the shambers. This week we have had about 60 of our own men and 40 of our own women and some 40 women from neighbouring farms picking on an average day. There is still not enough ripe coffee to make for heavy picking, but the amount picked daily is gradually increasing, and we pick just over half a ton on the best day. Later, when the real rush comes, the same number of pickers will pick 2 or 3 times as much, and in addition we shall get more pickers, for they will come from far and near when they hear that picking is easy. Also, to Rosemary's disgust, we shall stop almost all other farm work in order to pick, though really she sees the wisdom of this, now that the coffee prices this week have reached the new astronomic world record of over £1,000 per tonne at the Nairobi auction. The picking is picturesque, with the women walking about from tree to tree with baskets on their heads, and often with a baby slung on their backs. Each picker has a row allotted to him, and one foreman is responsible for 25 rows. I walk through them all once or twice. When a picker has filled a basket, he goes to a collecting point called the camp, where our headman presides and measures out their pick, paying them in cents on the spot. A picker earns about £1 a day if he is picking for cents alone. Our own men have to pick a certain amount on their monthly salary, and they earn cents for any amount above that. The picker's wages for 1 ton of coffee come to somewhere around £15. From the camp, the coffee is taken in sacks on the ox wagon to the factory. Here there is quite complicated machinery for pulping the beans from the cherry or outer skin, and there is a series of washing operations to clean the beans, followed by the fermentation and the drying. The washing and the pulping take at least 20,000 gallons of water each day. Peter goes down in the morning, and I go down in the evening to supervise Alalu, our head factory man, and his various minions. Rosemary and David come too, and David is fascinated by the whole operation of the machinery and of the water running down the washing channels. He tells us continually in an excited voice such things as, "Water! Another water! More water! Look at the coffee! Coffee water! Big machine! Look at the machine!" and so on. We think we shall have to curtail this evening visit, because twice last week he woke up in the night and told Monique, "Coffee water! Round and round and round!" So he must have been overexcited. He and Beatrice pick about 1/4 of a basket of coffee between 9:30 and 10:30 when he goes for his morning walk. 20th of November 1949. On Friday evening, Rosemary and I went to a meeting of the General Committee, and later of the Show Committee, of the forthcoming Championship Dog Show, which is to be held in Nakuru in February. Rosemary has been made a member, and I am chairman of both committees. Our friend Mrs. Gamer is joint secretary, and she seemed to be the only person who knew the personalities of the dog world in Kenya. We soon discovered that she had many axes to grind and was using our committee of up-country people as pawns to get her own back on the Kennel Club at Nairobi. She has been expelled from the General Committee of the Kennel Club, though not from the club itself. I was having none of this nonsense, and when we came to the appointment of judges, the discussion became quite heated, and I had to tell her in no uncertain terms that she was trying to steamroller her ideas across the committee. After that, she sulked, so we were able to conduct the meeting as we wanted. She presented a formidable figure in a large black lace crinoline hat, a green and mauve striped dress, the usual long earrings, and a huge Alsatian sitting beside her. Rosemary sat next to the Alsatian, which looked at her menacingly each time she argued with Mrs. Gamer. The Alsatian was not co-opted onto the committee.
We visited an up-country sale.
27th of November 1949. We set off at 6:30 a.m. on Monday morning. Charles, Long and Rosemary sat behind, while Karanja was in front with me driving. When we got down to the tarmac road which runs from Nairobi to Nakuru, this road is about 9 miles from us, we turned right instead of left towards Nairobi. As soon as we passed through Nakuru, the tarmac came to an end, and we proceeded for mile after mile with a huge plume of dust rising in our wake. Whenever we met another car, we hastily wound up the windows. It is lovely driving at that early hour out here. The countryside is bright and sparkling, and it is deliciously cool. The road was a red road, and there was a varying landscape of bright green vegetation stretching on either side, interspersed with patches of scrub country and thorn trees or rolling slopes of dried-up grass, or small areas of forest with pine and gum trees high above us. Continuously, there were wonderful views of distant mountains with their ever-changing colours. We crossed one escarpment at over 9,000 feet. At 10:30 we had breakfast at a hotel at Eldoret, which is a nice little town, with the streets lined with double scarlet poinsettias. Then on again for 2 more hours, until we left the so-called main road just before Kitale and turned down real country lanes, tracks out here. Now we were driving straight towards Mount Elgon, which towered in front of us. Eventually we arrived at the farm at which the dispersal sale was being held. A rostrum and sail ring had been erected of wattle poles and thatch, with a concrete drinking trough in the middle, and on the floor maize leaves which looked like rushes. There were a lot of people. We strolled across and looked at the bulls in their loose boxes, and we found that Charles was perfectly right when he said that the only one worth buying, as far as we were concerned, was the imported one. He was a beautiful little animal in excellent condition, small and quiet, and had been brought here as a calf from the famous White Ladies herd, and reared for the first 6 months out here by Charles himself. As we sat around the ring waiting for him to come in, I looked at Rosemary and said with a grin, "It's been a long, long road for us from Reading Cattle Market to here." The bidding opened at 10 guineas, and it soon became apparent that another Guernsey breeder was bidding against us. At 40 guineas, the crowd were becoming most excited, so in a loud voice I told Charles, who was bidding for us, to go on. However, the other man had had it, and with the drop of a hammer, the little bull joined the Rhodora herd. On Thursday we went to Nairobi for one night. The main purpose of our visit was to see Angus Lorry, our accountant. We lunched with him and his wife and daughter, Freddie, Vi and Sheila, at the Flamingo, which is one of 2 excellent restaurants in Nairobi. Later, Freddie took us in his car to see Lady Macmillan, who is also one of the oldest settlers in Kenya, and has known Freddie for many years. She is an American, aged 84, and as far back as 1904 she crossed Abyssinia with her husband. She has a lovely rambling house, old-fashioned and with nice furniture. In front was a charming terraced garden with a lily pond. In the evening, after dinner at the Muthaiga Club, where we all stayed, Freddie introduced us to many important people. These included Charles Taylor, chairman of the Coffee Board, and Sir Frederick and Lady Wilson, who are the main suppliers of whole milk to Nairobi, and he is chairman of the Board of Agriculture. When I was introduced to Lady Wilson, I did not know who she was, and as we started to talk farming, I asked her whether she had a farm. Later, I discovered that she had 20,000 acres and 1,100 cows in milk. 4th of December, 1949. This week, Rosemary and I began to feel that the coffee was ripening faster than we were likely to get around to picking it. I told you in a recent letter that after the coffee berry begins to turn pink, there are only about 8 days before it goes hard and black and becomes unpulpable. We should be picking up to 700 or 800 debbies a day. A debby is a 4-gallon paraffin tin, and there are about 550 debbies to 1 ton of our coffee dry. We were, in fact, picking only about 500 to 600 debbies per day. Of course, every other coffee farmer in the valley is also picking his flush, and there is much competition for outside pickers. People go to all sorts of lengths to attract pickers to their farm by offering more money or free cigarettes or some other bribe. Neighbouring farmers frequently come to harsh words over the matter. I decided that words or no words, and at the risk of becoming the most unpopular man in the valley, I would send out our lorry on scavenging expeditions first thing every morning with a specially picked recruiter on board to go to places where we knew that there are concentrations of Africans. And I also decided to offer them a special bonus if they pick for 6 days in the week, and an even more special bonus if they pick for 7. The results have been surprising and gratifying. Our lorry makes 2 trips each morning and comes back laden to the gunnels with singing and shouting BBs who appear to be hanging on by their eyelids all over it, and each one has several children who hang on to their mothers in an equally precarious manner. We collected 73 yesterday. Our picking rate for the last 2 days has been 912 and 860 debbies. Now I am wondering how many local farmers are going to come and visit me with a gun. 11th of December, 1949. It is Saturday evening after dinner, and we are in the sitting room sitting in our dressing gowns in front of the fire. The dry weather wind is blowing strongly outside. We are both rather smugly pleased that it is Sunday tomorrow. The head boy, Janus, has just removed the coffee with his usual "Kwaheri" goodbye as he glides out of the room. In a little while I shall let out the dogs and then take Red round to the Swiss consulate and check that all doors are locked and that the night guard is on duty and that water is flowing into our house tank. Janus's newly born Toto has not been at all well the last few days, and although Rosemary cured his BB from various aches and pains after the actual birth, and insisted on regular 3-hourly feeds, she felt it too risky to do anything about such a tiny, premature baby without expert advice. She was much relieved when Janus agreed to send it down with its mother in our car to the native hospital on Monday. The boys' huts are at the other side of the lawn, down a little path just outside the garden. This couple keep their huts spotlessly clean, but to see the baby or do anything for the BB, Rosemary nearly has to lie on the floor herself, for Janus sleeps on a camp bed. But his BB and the baby curl up at the foot of the bed in a corner on blankets on the floor. We also had even newer arrivals in the form of twins born to our African herdsman's BB. He is terribly worried because it is considered abnormal and unlucky to have twins. They have both died, and we have our suspicions. He wanted to know whether twins are ever born in England. For some time now we have felt that we did not properly understand the grading certificates which we received from the bacon factory, and indeed that we did not know what good bacon should be like, nor how a pig should be fed to produce it, or what was the best breed of pig to produce first-quality bacon. So we wrote to the manager of the bacon factory and asked if we could come and see him and visit the factory. He invited us to lunch. The tour of the factory was fascinating. First we saw the pigs being unloaded from the railway siding at the factory door. From here they were brought up a ramp and rendered unconscious immediately and silently by an electrical device. Then they were slung up on a rail upon which they moved on an endless chain, but always in the same order throughout all the processes. First their throats were cut and the blood was drained, and this was followed by 4 different washing processes. Then the pig was divided into 2 sides and the backbone removed, and blow lamps put all over the body to remove the hairs. Next the insides were removed and examined by African vets. A European then measured the fat at the shoulder, loin and hams, and he weighed the carcass. From there it went forward for examination by a European vet. Then it went into a cooling room for 24 hours. On coming out of the cooling room, the bacon was examined for firmness, and upon its quality its fate would be decided. The best quality would make York hams for export, while the worst would go for sausage meat. We watched them making sausages and gelatine and canning luncheon meats, and we saw the huge cold rooms where the bacon matures and the elaborate system for smoking the bacon. Every piece of the pig is used for something. The whole place was spotlessly clean. 25th of December, 1949. Christmas really started for us on Friday this week when we went down to the town to do our shopping. Nakuru was at its gayest, with the shops decorated and full of people. It is really amusing shopping there, now that we are beginning to know a lot of people. All the farmers come in from far and wide, and one meets all one's friends and hears all the news. First, we wanted to contact Vi Ward, so we told Karanja, our chauffeur, to watch and see which shop she went into on arriving in the town. Quite soon he came to the post office where we were, and said that she was in the grocer's, so we crossed over, and there she was. Then Charles Long came out of his office, Chettle & Co., the local auctioneers, with a tiny white Christmas cake under his arm which he was taking home. We had a long talk with him and another man who joined us, wanting to buy some heifers. As we stood there, a party consisting of Roy and Nancy Laird, he was bursar at the London hospital but left when they wanted to nationalise him, and Commander and Mrs. Everett joined us, all talking at once, one about Christmas presents, another about vets, a third about children's parties. The lads have asked David to his first Christmas party on December the 28th, and so on. It was lovely bright sunshine, but everyone was in a cheery mood, and the decorations and the Christmas wrappings round the presents made it all seem as much like Christmas as it would seem at this time in England. We saw many more neighbours during the morning, and ended up at the Rift Valley Club, where we went to talk business with Mrs. Stobbs, the new secretary to the Dog Show Committee. Saturday, Christmas Eve, was a holiday on the farm. We spent the morning taking a coloured cine film of the farm for Rosemary to bring back in March for you all to see. After lunch, the headman and the under-headman came for their presents. We gave them each a sweater, 50 cigarettes and some money. I think they must have been pleased, because later in the evening the headman called on us quite unexpectedly and presented us solemnly with a live chicken as a Christmas present from the Jaluo village. We were rather pleased with this spontaneous gesture. The ordinary run of farm labour received as a gift from us 1 shilling, with which to buy the meat of the ox which was slaughtered for them, a free issue of sugar, and 1 day's holiday, Saturday, with pay. Holidays, including Sundays, are not normally paid working days out here. A man is only paid if he actually works. Christmas morning dawned after a restless night for us all. Actually, every night this week has been rather disturbed by the noises the Africans have been making in their village. They seem to think of nothing of singing without a pause until 3 or 4 in the morning, and starting again at 6. I think one of the reasons is that we have given them the customary permission to brew some native beer, and 2 sacks of maize meal with which to do it. We were called with breakfast at 8:30, and Janus brought in a large bowl containing 2 dozen eggs, which was a gift to us from Guara, our cook. Then David and the Swiss girls arrived at 9:15. David had already investigated the contents of the stocking which he found at the end of his bed when he woke up. It had a soft, floppy toy monkey sticking out of the top of it. We put everybody's present in a pile beside one of their shoes, and David was hugely excited to see his stack of presents. He sat between us in bed, and we all worked hard at unpacking. We 3 were delighted with the lovely presents you sent. David also had several presents from children in the locality. His expression of wonder and amazement had to be seen to be believed. Monique, besides giving him a little toy, had made him the sweetest little red check cotton sunsuit and a beautifully knitted navy blue and white pants and jersey for when it is cold in the evening. Beatrice gave him a toy and had knitted him 2 cardigans, one scarlet and one white. We gave him a kiddie car. Rosemary had sent a message to the headman, Obwaka, tactfully saying that we did not wish to be disturbed before 11 a.m. We had heard that we were liable to have visitors at all hours of the day. Although we heard much noise in the distance, it was not until 11 sharp that we heard the sound of many chanting voices approaching us. The first contingent was representative of the boys from the coffee factory, headed by Alalo, decorated with gumtree leaves, bougainvillea and plumbago flowers in their hair and metal discs on their legs. Alalo wore a calfskin over his shoulders. The effect was rather marred, we thought, by khaki-coloured shirts, but there were also some bright shirts to lend colour to the scene. The dance resembled the Charleston, but with terrific rhythm, helped by the drumming of feet on the ground. The chanting consisted of Alalo singing some words in Jaluo and an answering chorus from the dancers. The grass is all worn away in a circle on the lawn. We took some cine camera shots, and after a bit another band of Jaluos came from the other side, and the 2 parties joined up. There must have been about 100 in all. Obwaka arrived back from church on his bicycle. He is a Catholic. And we put David on his bicycle in the centre of the dancing ring. Eventually we gave the dancers 10 shillings between them and some cigarettes, and they went off dancing back to the village. Manasseh, our garden boy, stayed behind and, without being asked, cleared the lawn of leaves and bits and pieces, and David helped him. We took a film of this too, because Manasseh is very tall, and David looked so tiny beside him. We had lunch at 12:30, turkey and delicious plum pudding, which Monique had made 3 weeks ago, and which duly came in flames. At 3:30, the entire Clark family arrived for tea. We had sandwiches, chocolate cake, and a wonderful Christmas cake decorated with a spray of coffee, which, with 3 red berries, looked very like holly without the prickles. We made the cake from 3 recipe books, a Scoffier, an East African one, and one from England. And I must say that the combined recipes made it a pre-war affair, and it was really delicious. To finish up, we had jelly and cream, poured from Mary Lou's lovely little silver cow. We are enchanted with this new addition to the Rhodora herd. After tea, we all walked over to the new house which we are building, and which has now got half its roof on. We think we are going to move the Clarks up to this house when it is complete, because they will be so much nearer to their work. We showed them all round and planned out their future garden with them. When we got back, it was time for David to go to bed, and I put on our 2 cine films for the benefit of the Clark children and the houseboys. Towards the end of the film, the Lumbwa tribe, who work for us mainly as herd boys, arrived silently on the lawn. It was just dusk. They are as fine a collection of men as you could find, mostly over 6 feet tall. There were about 25 of them. Most of them were covered in their tribal decorations, with finely worked coloured beads used as collars, headdresses, and over the shoulders. The leader had his face painted white. They stripped to the waist, linked arms in a circle with the leader in the centre, and began to sing in a sort of harmony, in rich, deep voices. As they sang, they danced in perfect rhythm. There was quite a variety of dances and songs, in one of which one of them made a mock attack upon another with a spear. We stood on the lawn close to them, and we were rather moved by this stimulating and intensely virile performance. They stayed about an hour, and then they moved off into the night under a perfect starlit sky, singing Saiseri, which means goodbye in Lumbwa. 1st of January 1950. Rosemary and I will always remember David's first party, even if David himself cannot remember it when he is grown up. The Laird's house is truly delightful. It is built on 2 floors, which is unusual out here, and plastered white on the outside with a dark red-tiled roof. From the veranda on the ground floor and the broad paved terrace flanked with beautiful flowers, or from the balconies on the floor above, one looks down a steeply sloping lawn scattered with shady trees to a tiny, picturesque lake complete with little boat for canoeing. The first part of the party consisted of the guests arriving. Children, mothers and fathers sat about on the terrace or stood gossiping in groups while I took a colour film of the gathering. David was, as usual, rather shy at first, but he soon got over it. Even so, he did not bother to talk to other children much, but wandered about, perfectly composed, taking a good look at everything. A funny, sturdy soul, not apparently in the least dependent on his parents after the initial shyness had worn off, walking about slowly with his hands behind his back, taking everything in. There were some 25 children, and he was amongst the youngest, although the oldest cannot have been much more than 5. After tea we all assembled in the hall, and the curtains were drawn, so there was quite a hush, when there came a very loud knocking at the door. Some of the older children squeaked, "Come in!" and the door opened, and David beheld his first Father Christmas, complete with white pillowcase full of presents. On Tuesday we went out to tea down the valley with some farmers called Geoffrey and June Ireland. Like the Lairds, they have a charming garden with a large green lawn sweeping down to a lake complete with diving board, water lilies, and so on. The house is not very nice, but the farm is truly lovely. We have been there before to see their stock, so this time they showed us first their coffee. We thought it was better than ours. The berries are large and more regular, and the trees were not wilting as ours are. I think the main reason is because they have had 8 inches more rain than us, although they only live 4 miles away, and their crop is not quite so heavy as ours. We often find, too, that other people's farms seem in better shape than ours, because they have been working on them for years, whereas we have only been on ours for 6 months. From the coffee we went on to see their orange groves. These were fascinating. Rows of bushy but tall trees covered with oranges in different stages of ripening, which glowed against the dark green leaves. A golden crop. The trees were in sweeping lines, and the copper-brown earth was neatly raked between each row. The Irelands are a very hard-working couple of about our age, and they are making a great success of their farm. On Saturday, New Year's Eve, we went to our first dance in Kenya. It was given by Mrs. Stobbs at her house outside Njoro, about 30 miles away. There were about 30 couples, and it was quite pleasant, though none of our actual friends were there. We got home at about 2:15 a.m. Next morning we had breakfast at 6:45 a.m. and set off for Nairobi. As we approached the city, we stopped to admire a small herd of giraffe, which was grazing on the verge of the main road. We took off from Nairobi West Airport soon after 11 a.m. in a nice little American Beechcraft, which we had chartered. It is a single-engined affair, but quite as comfortable as a motor car. As we gained height over Nairobi, we saw masses of animals below us in the game park. We travelled above the cloud, so that it was perfectly smooth, and there was so little noise that we were able to chat and read papers all the way. I sat beside the pilot and was able to renew my acquaintance with the computer, which reminded me of the controller's course which I took at Stanmore during the war. After 2 hours in our Beechcraft, we touched down on the edge of the sea, right beside the Sinbad Hotel at Malindi. We had lunch and a rest, and then started this letter, which I am finishing on Monday sitting on our veranda within a few feet of the sea. We have come 700-odd miles for 1 week's holiday and rest. It is the only week we can fit in. We are about 80 miles from Mombasa, northwards up the coast. There are quite a few brown-looking people about, and we feel very white-skinned at present. The sands are lovely. We walked a long way in the cool of the evening and came back along the beach road. We saw masses of palm trees with clusters of coconuts upon them, and huge mango trees and cotton growing in the fields. We have just had a bathe, and it was glorious. So warm. Rosemary was an awful coward, and would scarcely come in above our ankles because, as it was a new ocean for her, she had some romantic idea that she might be carried off by a shark, or a giant stingray, or something. 8th of January 1950. The inevitable Kenya habit of 6:30 a.m. tea follows us even down here. One awakens to the sound of a voice asking, "Hodi, may I come in?" And one answers sleepily, "Karibu, draw near." And from the balcony the bedroom boy steps in and the day has started. We have brought 2 Swahili books which we study until breakfast at 8 a.m., which is brought to us in our room. Then we get up and go for a swim and walk upon the beach. Returning to the hotel, we work on the herd books on the veranda until lunch. From 2 p.m. until 4 p.m, everybody goes to sleep. After a quick tea at 4 o'clock, we go out again for a long walk until dark. The climate here is quite different from the climate up country. It is extremely hot, and one feels always surrounded by a damp, moist atmosphere. It would be unbearable were it not that there is always either a stiff inshore or outshore breeze blowing. The moon on the sea at night looks very lovely. The vegetation is also different. The trees are exceptionally fine, and quite the loveliest of them is the flamboyant. It is a kind of acacia with bright red and orange flowers like big orchids all over it. The flame colour against the blue sky is really breathtaking. Then there are the cashew nut trees, the pawpaw, mango and kapok trees, the coconut palm and the huge baobab trees. Baobabs are very plentiful in the district. The trunk is far larger than any I have seen before, although the branches are rather small and bare in little clusters. It is said that when God created the world, he was tired by evening of the 6th day, and he happened to be passing over this part of the world on his way home. He felt in his pocket and found 1 packet of seed left. Very worried that he should have forgotten this packet, he opened it and threw it over the land. This was the beginning of the baobab tree. But unfortunately, in his hurry, God planted the seed upside down, so that the roots of the tree are in the air and the branches underground. That is exactly what a baobab tree looks like, a giant oak planted upside down. The huge trunks are said to be hollow, and the local tribe of natives, the Giriamas, burn a hole in the side and place their dead inside, standing upright for the ants to dispose of them. For this reason, they never cut down or mutilate a baobab, so they are well preserved. These local Africans are also fine specimens, finer than those up country, possibly because they have the advantage of fish in their diet. They are a very dark copper brown, not tall, but well built. The women wear grass skirts and are bare above the waist. They are a cheery, nice people, and they look very primitive. In the hotel the boys are excellent, willing and well trained. They are drawn from many different tribes, but some of them are Swahili speaking, and we find it much easier to understand than our boys at home. Malindi town is very squalid and tumble-down. There are many Arabs living there, and one sees their dhows out fishing before the hotel. The town is owned by a sheikh, from whom the British government leases certain land. He, the sheikh, is the only man who can fly his standard from the ground. The Union Jack flutters from a flagpole attached to a building. On Wednesday, and again on Friday, we called in at Gedi. This city was built in the 15th and early 16th centuries by Arabs, who, for several hundreds of years, had been settled up the coast of East Africa. It was abandoned in the latter part of the 16th or early 17th century and was rediscovered by an Englishman in 1925. It was a large city, covering an area of some 84 acres. Today the scrub has been cleared from most of the area, but huge trees remain among the deserted ruins, some of them growing out of the very walls themselves. Baboons and snakes now live where once the proud Arab king of Malindi and Mombasa had his summer palace. Why Gedi was abandoned is not known, but the most likely reason is that the wells dried up. The whole city is built on coral, out of coral blocks, although it is 4 miles from the sea. The coral reef extends 6 miles inland. Gedi is one of 15 ruined and abandoned cities on this coast. As we were coming away from our second visit, we saw a deadly green mamba climbing a column whilst the Africans threw stones at it. I had to point out to them that the column had been there for hundreds of years, and it was a pity to spoil it in 1950 just because a snake climbed up it. They pointed out that one of their number had died in less than an hour recently from one of those snakes. These 2 trips to the abandoned city were undertaken when we were on our way to the Blue Lagoon. The lagoon is fringed with palm trees, while the sand stretches, pearly white, around the edge of the water in a big semicircle. The water is translucent and a deep blue, streaked with bright green in places where there are deeper pools. The entrance to the lagoon from the sea is barred by huge masses of land, and the sea recedes at low tide or advances at high tide through gaps between these land masses. The hotel has a little snack bar amongst the palms. When we arrived, a man who lives in one of the only 3 houses for miles around kindly sent his boy to shin up a palm tree for us, and he got us each an unripe coconut. He cut the top off it, and we drank the milk, which was delicious. The green of the hinterland, with its graceful palms, contrasting with the white glare of the sands and the blue of the sea, made a beautiful picture. We bathed, and the water was almost hot. As we walked into it, we could see the bottom quite clearly, and it was so buoyant that I could float in a sitting position, with legs drawn up, but without moving my legs or arms. We took a long walk along the beach and picked up many cowrie and other brightly coloured shells to take back to David. While we were lying on the sand, a large Arab dhow with all its sail set passed swiftly across the horizon, and we wondered whether it had come from India or Persia, and where it was going. On our second visit I was introduced to the sport of goggling. This consists of wearing goggles and special flippers on one's feet for swimming underwater. One has the impression of being at the aquarium. The seabed is lit up and clear. The coral is glowing red and white. The seaweed is waving about to the movement of the water, and wonderful fish swim slowly about amongst it all. It is like fairyland. We are hoping to be able to obtain a new addition to the animal life at Rhodora to take back with us. Think of a word of 8 letters beginning with M, whose favourite dish is snake. They make charming pets and become quite affectionate. 21st of January 1950. On Wednesday we had a wretched day. Directly after lunch we went down to Nakuru, where we met Mrs. Stobbs, the Honorary Secretary of the Dog Show Committee. We collected the schedules from the printers and then trailed around the various hotels to see who would take on the catering and bar arrangements for the show. Each one was more disappointing than the last, and at the final attempt we disturbed a pubkeeper in his afternoon nap with his secretary. You can imagine how popular we were. Then we drove out to Njoro, a distance of some 20 miles, to the Stobbses' house. It was drizzling in Nakuru and windy, but the drizzle was not enough to lay the dust on the appalling road which leads to their home. We were glad to find a cup of tea awaiting us, and then she and her husband, Rosemary and I, all sat around the dining-room table, each with a job. Entry forms had to be folded. Entry form put in schedule. Schedule into envelope. Envelope stuck up. Stamp on envelope. We did 360. They have 2 visiting children who do lessons with their own small girl and a cousin who is a teacher to cope. But she does not cope, and the combination of children, cats, dogs, a parrot, and a none too tidy or clean room made Rosemary's nose wrinkle in an alarmingly obvious manner. Instead of houseboys, they have BBs in the house, which is unusual out here. One of these was named Tabitha, and seemed to be called for every 5 minutes above the din. At 7:30, the time at which we had said we must leave, we had still not quite finished, so we weakly agreed to stay to supper. This was, according to form, a pale cabbage soup, partially cooked curry, and a chocolate mould, of sorts. Next day in Nairobi we had a busy afternoon, and from 4 o'clock our peace was shattered because we fetched the little mongoose. If you can imagine a tiny object about 3 inches long from the tip of its nose to the beginning of its tail, and then another 1.5 inches for its tail, you have him in a nutshell. All yesterday the whole household was turned upside down and completely dominated by this little creature. He is full of character and very sweet, almost too young to have been taken from his mother, but full of life and very alert. He makes 3 noises. One is a squeak, when he is a bit lonely and looking for someone to make a fuss of him. The second is a tick-tick noise when he is busy looking for bugs in cracks in the floor and is quite contented. And the third is a purring sound, just like a cat, which he makes if you stroke his tummy. If you hold him in your hand, he curls up and goes to sleep. He likes exploring everything and is a most thorough little busybody, so much so that he decided to climb up inside my trouser leg, and as he neared the top, I hastily had to remove my trousers. Now, if he is about, I roll my trousers up to the knee, and he climbs up my leg to see if he can get down inside my sock. When Monique came along after lunch, he was asleep in a fold of her dress, and he did not fall out, even though she was walking about. He has been so enchanting that no one has been able to do any work, so now he is banished to one of the travelling dog boxes, with the holes covered with wire gauze, when we are busy. He loves meat, but he will not drink milk. Today we gave him an egg, which he loved, but he is still too young to crack it himself. He is naturally house-trained and uses an earth tray at night and the lawn by day. David is not allowed to touch him, but is tickled to death with him and goes about saying, "Where is the little mouse?" or "Where is Wiki?" We have named the mongoose Ricky. David is showing signs of taking after Rosemary's orderly ways. Everything has to be just so. Even if the blanket on his bed is not quite as it should be, he has now taken to making a scene, so Daddy was called in to cope last night. After being terribly severe, he nearly spoilt the whole effect by melting when David, in between the most heart-rending sobs, said, "Poor David, poor David is crying." P.S. Since writing this, Ricky climbed up the lavatory, fell in and drowned. We are all desolate.